Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something I think we've all experienced? Icebreakers.
Mm.
You know those activities meant to get us interacting in a group?
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes awkward, sometimes fun, and often kind of cringy, right?
Not right.
So we're going to really dig into an article by Sylvia Ola.
Okay.
She's not a fan of pointless icebreakers.
Mm.
And we're going to be kind of weaving in some insights from educational psychology along the way. Yeah, see if
Interesting.
there's any science to back this stuff up.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what the research says.
So Ola starts her article off
Okay.
with this hilarious story about a workshop she was at. It was for a group of really experienced people,
Mm.
directors, those kinds of folks.
Okay.
And one of these guys, a total pro, years of experience giving presentations and stuff,
Yeah.
he completely freezes up
Um,
when they ask him to do the icebreaker.
During the icebreaker, what was it?
It was just to introduce himself, which is
Yeah.
funny because you think, this guy talks for a living.
Right, you'd think he'd be used to that.
But it just shows you how these activities can, I don't know,
Make people anxious.
yeah, anxious, especially when they feel forced or just, irrelevant.
It's funny because that story actually points to something really interesting in educational psychology. Sometimes the things we do to, ease anxiety can end up doing the opposite,
Totally.
especially for people who are more introverted,
Oh, absolutely.
Forcing them to be super social right away can be really stressful.
Bola really gets into this idea that, making adults do these sometimes childish activities.
Yeah.
It's almost like treating them like kids again.
Hmm.
And it kind of takes away their sense of being in control.
Interesting.
She even compares it to when her grandma would make her introduce herself to strangers as a kid.
Oh, I get it.
Something most adults wouldn't want to do.
Right, it feels a little patronizing.
Exactly. And it's funny, the comments on her article, it's like everyone has these icebreaker horror stories.
Oh.
From having to pick your favorite fruit to literally rubbing the shoulders of the person in front of you,
Wow.
like some weird trust exercise gone wrong.
Sounds like there's a real disconnect between, the idea behind icebreakers and how people actually experience them.
For sure.
Makes you wonder if we're misunderstanding how adults learn and interact in groups.
So does educational psychology have anything to say about all this? Is there any proof that icebreakers can actually be good?
There is some research that suggests that icebreakers, when they're done well, can actually have a positive effect on learning and how groups work together.
Okay.
For example, there are studies that show that even small amounts of self-disclosure, like sharing a fun fact about yourself,
Right.
can actually trigger the release of oxytocin. It's a hormone.
Oh, I've heard of that.
It's linked to feelings of trust and connection.
So it's not just about getting people talking to fill the time.
Yeah.
There's a real brain chemistry thing happening.
Exactly. And there's evidence, too, that icebreakers can help people kind of activate what they already know.
Okay, that's interesting.
Makes them more open to new information.
How so?
Well, when we talk about our own experiences, it's like we're kind of getting our brains ready to make connections to new ideas.
Oh, like you're building a foundation for the new stuff to stick to.
Exactly. But the key is that the icebreaker needs to be designed in a way that actually helps this happen. If it feels forced, or doesn't relate to the topic, or it's just too childish for the group,
Yeah.
it can backfire.
And Ola has some great examples of this. She talks about this workshop where they had to pick an M&M color
Okay.
and then share a story based on that color. And someone in the comments was like, I just wasted 20 minutes sharing bullshit information
Wow.
because it felt so pointless. It had nothing to do with what they were actually there to learn.
That really gets to something Ola keeps bringing up in the article, purpose.
Yeah.
If the icebreaker doesn't have a clear purpose,
Yeah.
beyond just queuing time or getting people to make noise,
That's going to feel like a waste of time.
she actually quotes someone in there who's like, I just want to know, who likes this? Who told you it was a good idea?
Ooh. They're not holding back.
It's that frustration, when you're stuck doing something that feels pointless.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. And it's often worse because you don't even get a choice. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Has anyone ever actually asked if you wanted to do an icebreaker?
No, not really.
Ola makes that point too. It's like being back in elementary school. You have to do whatever the teacher planned,
Right, no matter how you feel about it.
whether it's fun or helpful or not. And for adults, that lack of control can be a big problem.
Right. We're used to having more say in how we spend our time, how we learn.
Exactly. It's interesting, though, even though Ola is, pretty critical of these traditional icebreakers,
Yeah.
she does see some value in getting people talking, especially when it comes to learning. She even suggests some different approaches.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that she thinks are more effective and engaging.
Okay, so what does she suggest?
Well, one of her big things is to focus on activities that have a clear purpose
Hmm.
and that directly connect to what you're trying to teach.
I like that.
So instead of like asking people about their favorite animal, which,
Right.
she suggests starting with a sentence completion exercise, something that gets people thinking about the topic right away.
Oh, okay.
Like she gives an example. The memory that comes to mind in regards to the topic is,
Hmm.
and one thing I learned from this experience is,
Oh, that's good. It's a lot more focused.
right, it encourages people to reflect a bit.
And it doesn't feel as forced and awkward as some icebreakers can.
Exactly.
So she's all about purpose and relevance. What else?
She also really emphasizes the importance of, respecting individual needs and preferences, especially when it comes to introverts.
Mm-hmm.
She's adamant that icebreakers should never be designed in a way that makes people feel bad for being quieter or more reserved.
I think that's so important. Not everyone thrives in those really high energy, super interactive environments.
Exactly. A good icebreaker should create space for all different personality types to participate.
In a way that feels authentic to them.
Yeah, so that they can actually be themselves.
Okay, so purpose, relevance, and respect for different personalities. I like it. Does she give any examples of icebreakers she actually liked?
She does. She talks about two positive
Oh,
experiences.
tell me about them.
One was at a Gallup Strengths workshop. They had done some pre-work assessments and things.
Okay.
And then the icebreaker was to find other people who shared your top strengths.
Oh, interesting.
So it was a natural conversation starter,
Yeah,
and people could connect on a more meaningful level because it was about something they actually had in common.
I love that. It's like it had a purpose, it connected to the topic, and it let people share as much or as little as they wanted.
Exactly. It ticked all the boxes.
Okay, what about the other example?
This one was from a workshop on the Big Five personality types.
Oh, cool.
And the facilitator was really upfront about the fact that, not everyone's a fan of icebreakers.
Yeah.
And he specifically acknowledged the introverts in the room. He actually split the group in two.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Extroverts in one area, introverts in another. And then he used the way the two groups were interacting
Really?
to illustrate the concept of personality types. Like it was a teaching moment.
Oh, I love that. It's like he was so aware of people's different needs.
Yeah, exactly. And he made it a part of the learning experience.
So smart. So basically, Ola's argument is that icebreakers can be great if they're done right,
Yeah, that seems to be the gist.
but so many times they just miss the mark.
It happened.
They lack purpose, they're not relevant, and they don't respect individual needs.
Makes sense.
And reading through the comments on her article, it's clear a lot of people feel the same way.
Yeah, who hasn't had at least one awkward icebreaker experience they'd rather forget?
Seriously.
Yeah,
But it's good to see that people are starting to think more critically about how to do icebreakers better.
for sure. I think there's a real push for them to be more thoughtful and intentional.
Yeah, because when they're done right, they can actually be really valuable.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about Ola's take on icebreakers, the good and the bad,
Mm-hmm.
and we've started to dig into what educational psychology has to say about it all.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
It really is. But there's still more to unpack.
Definitely.
So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into the world of icebreakers. We'll be going even deeper into the psychology behind these activities, exploring some more examples of effective and engaging icebreakers, and considering how we can apply these insights to create more inclusive and meaningful learning experiences.
It'll be good to really dissect those effective examples and see what made them work.
It
And
will.
hopefully, give our listeners some ideas they can take away and use themselves.
Totally. So stick with us. We'll be right back after a quick break.
It really is amazing how such a seemingly simple thing, like icebreakers, can spark these really deep discussions.
Yeah, like about learning and how groups work, even just like human interaction in general.
Exactly.
And I think Ola makes a really good point when she talks about moving away from this idea that one size fits all.
Right.
Like we need to start designing icebreakers that are specifically for the group of people and what they're there to learn.
That's so important. And it requires a deep understanding of how adults learn. And one thing that I think often gets overlooked is the idea of psychological safety.
Oh, interesting. What's that?
Well, it's basically this idea that for people to really engage in learning,
Yeah.
they have to feel safe to express themselves, share their ideas, even make mistakes without being judged.
That makes a lot of sense. And icebreakers can either help with that or like totally mess it up.
Exactly. Like a good icebreaker can build that sense of safety, help people connect, establish goals,
Hmm.
set a positive tone for the whole session. But a bad icebreaker can do the opposite. Make people anxious, force them to interact in ways they don't want to,
Yeah.
or even like highlight differences in a way that makes people feel isolated.
It's all about how it's designed and presented, I guess.
Exactly. So instead of just grabbing some random icebreaker game off the internet,
Right.
we really need to stop and ask ourselves, what's the purpose of this? How does it connect to what we're learning about? And how is it going to affect the group's sense of safety?
Ola gives some really cool examples of icebreakers that actually managed to do all of that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, one was this workshop where everyone wrote down a challenge they were facing,
Okay.
and they crumpled up the paper and threw it in a pile.
Hmm.
And then they all picked up a random piece of paper and read the challenge out loud.
Interesting.
And everyone would offer solutions or just like words of encouragement.
That's awesome. I love that it addresses a real need that people have, like needing support when you're facing a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And it creates this feeling of vulnerability
Right.
where everyone's kind of in it together,
And it avoids those like superficial getting to know you questions.
which can be so awkward.
Totally.
Yeah.
What was the other example?
Oh, this one was from a leadership training.
Okay.
The facilitator had people pair up and share a story about a time they were a leader, even if it was something small or unexpected.
I like that. It gets people thinking about leadership in a different way.
Right. And it connects it to their own lives.
Makes it more personal.
Yeah,
And I bet it helped people see themselves as leaders, too.
totally. So it sounds like if we're going to use icebreakers, we really need to make them count.
Yeah, they have to be meaningful and relevant, and they have to respect people's individual needs.
And sometimes maybe the best icebreaker is no icebreaker at all.
Right. Ola suggests that if people already know each other,
Yeah.
or the goals of the session are super clear,
Mm-hmm.
it might be better to just jump right into the content.
Interesting. Let people connect naturally as they're working together.
Exactly. So, listeners, what do you think? Have you had any memorable icebreaker experiences, good or bad? What do you think makes a good icebreaker?
It's amazing how much there is to talk about when it comes to icebreakers.
Right.
It seems so simple,
Right.
but there's a whole lot going on underneath the surface.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like the psychology, the group dynamics, the whole learning aspect.
Right. And so many people have strong opinions about it.
Oh, definitely.
Like if you read the comments on Ola's article,
Oh, yeah, the comments.
it's just a ton of icebreaker horror stories.
Oh, yeah. I can only imagine.
Like people have clearly had some really bad experiences.
It makes sense, though, right? When you're put in those awkward situations.
Totally. Like one person wrote, I literally wasted 20 minutes of my time sharing bullshit info based on what color M&M I picked out of a bag.
Oof. Yeah, I can see how that would be frustrating.
Right. And you can just tell they're rolling their eyes as they're typing that.
Absolutely. Like a lot of the comments really show how much resentment people feel towards these forced activities.
Yeah, it's like we're adults. We can figure out how to interact with each other without playing these silly games.
Yeah. Exactly. And some people feel like it's almost infantilizing.
Right, like being treated like a kid. One person even said, grown-ups shouldn't have to go through this.
It's like they're saying, give us some credit. We can handle this.
Exactly. And I think it speaks to this bigger thing happening where people just want more authenticity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like in all parts of life.
Yeah, like in work, in learning. They want more control over their own experiences.
It's like the old top-down approach is just not working as well anymore.
Right, like especially with younger generations.
Exactly. They're used to having more say in things.
It's like we don't need to be entertained or babied. Just give us learning experiences that are challenging, relevant, and respect our time.
I think that's a really good point.
And that's where understanding the psychology behind all this is so important.
Yeah, it's about understanding how adults learn and what motivates them.
Right, and how to create that sense of psychological safety we talked about before.
Absolutely. So we can actually design icebreakers that help people learn instead of hindering them.
Ola says it best. Make sure it has a purpose, other than let's get to know each other, because people can figure each other out. They don't need a nanny.
She's not wrong.
Right, like treat people like the capable adults they are.
It's all about creating a learning environment where everyone feels valued, respected, and ready to learn.
Yeah, love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into icebreakers,
Yeah.
think about your own experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you'll be inspired to ditch those old, tired icebreakers.
Yeah, try something new.
Something that sparks a real connection and gets people excited to learn.
Because at the end of the day, whether it's through a well-designed icebreaker or just diving straight into the material, The goal is to create that environment where people feel comfortable and ready to learn and grow.
That's it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It was a good one.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to our podcast and sharing it with your friends. We release new episodes every week, exploring a wide range of topics to make you think, learn, and engage with the world around you.
We'll see you next time.
Until then, stay curious.